30 years ago today, a young man was killed for being gay. It's been a dark spot in Bangor's history, but 3 decades later, Charlie Howard has not been forgotten. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Chris Fischini. Charlie Howard's story is still told, lessons are still being learned, and progress continues to be made. News Center Samantha Edwards joins us live from where that tragedy took place and joins us now with more on how Charlie Howard is being remembered this day. Samantha?
Chris, it was just behind me 30 years ago where Charlie Howard was walking arm in arm with his male friend when 3 teenagers pulled over, proceeded to beat him up and toss him over the railing despite his pleading that he didn't know how to swim. Now, those 3 boys later admitted to police they didn't mean to kill anyone. They were just, as they stated, wanted to beat up a gay man. Now, this tragedy opened the eyes of the community to a group of people being targeted, but those victims were too afraid to speak up.
Bangor has a past that has some bad things.
Charlie Howard was killed for being different. 3 teenagers threw Charlie to his death on July 7th, 1984. Because they claimed they wanted to beat up a gay guy.
Even the psychologists that did mental evaluations on those young men really thought, well, you know, boys will be boys kind of thing.
It was more of a norm back then for most people to kind of ignore the situation.
Ron Gascia was just starting out as a young officer with Bangor PD when Charlie was killed. He arrested 2 of the 3 teenagers behind the murder. Back then, Gascia says, cases like these went unnoticed. The victims didn't want to come forward and admit they were gay. Others just wanted to pretend it was not an issue.
I don't think Bangor was much different than the rest of the country. If you were gay and you were not a real risk taker, then you were closeted.
In 1984, Sue McKay was keeping her sexuality a secret. She didn't want anyone to know out of fear it would hurt her job, her family, or her friends.
30 years ago, I would not have walked arm in arm down the street. Today, I will occasionally walk arm in arm, but I'm still a little hesitant.
Charlie was the type of person who didn't really care whether or not he showed his homosexuality, and he always dressed up and wore makeup, and people would tell him, don't do that, Charlie, don't do that, it's not safe down there, and Charlie just wouldn't have anything of it. He'd just go.
You can't really understand unless you hear the stories. So it's important for you to know the stories.
The 3 boys were tried as juveniles, each put in a juvenile detention center, and all 3 are now free.
This tragic incident really started opening the door. It really was the catalyst, the turning point that opened that door, and people were really angry about what took place, and we started seeing this big population that we didn't even know existed.
By remembering on an annual basis that this is where we came from, then we can really appreciate how far we've come.
Now, to remember Charlie and his tragedy, a memorial sits right next to the Kunduskeg where the tragedy took place. And each year, the Universalist Unitarian Society holds a sermon in Charlie's honor. But they focus not on the tragedy, but what issues they need to fix moving forward. And that sermon will be held next Sunday at 10 a.m. Afterwards, they'll walk down the street and end up on State Street Bridge to remember Charlie Howard and the tragedy that happened here.